Welcome to the Coach Toolbox. I'm your host, Dr. Adil Malia, a leadership coach and counselor. This channel supports your professional and personal development as a leader with research-based and practice-focused learning. And we bring you the best career and life advice from guests who've been there and done that successfully. And now, our session today. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode on how HR leaders can hit the C-suite. And today we have Mr. Adil Malia, who is there with us as our guest. And it's going to be an amazing conversation because Adil, over the last 4 decades, has got an amazing experience in the HR field. He's currently the chief executive of his own firm, which is a business and consulting and coaching company called The Firm. And he has over 4 decades of experience. Having last assignment was as president HR of the Essar group. And he has held senior level positions in companies such as Coca-Cola, GE, and Godrej. And I've not done justice to who he is. With these comments, I'm going to put his LinkedIn profile in the description box for this episode. Adil, welcome.
Thank you so much and good morning to you.
So Adil, you have this amazing perspective from the HR field in terms of depth and width. And my sense is HR leaders do pretty well in their careers to reach up to senior leadership-ish, say GM, director-ish, maybe even VP level. But from there on, they struggle to move to the C-suite or get a seat on the board. So tell us a little bit about what's happening at this level. What happens at the C-suite?
So let me divert a little bit and tell you a few basic things because, once we get the basics very right, then it will be very easy for us to understand what is it that C-suites deliver or the boards deliver differently than what the comparative executives reporting to the CEO otherwise deliver. All right. So number one is let's understand that from a corporate perspective, people continue to be at the center of the value creation journey. It is very, very important because people predominantly are the only factor of value creation which can generate value from itself. Land can't generate value from itself. Your money in your bank account by itself can't generate any wealth for itself, nor can the land do anything for itself or raw material or machinery, right? But people are the only factor of value creation which can create value for themselves. And not only themselves, they can also create value from other factors of value creation, right? So whilst this is happening, if you really look into the kind of value people can create in an enterprise compared to the cost that organizations pay to get the people that create value for themselves, the cost is marginal compared to the multiple contributions of the size that they can make to the organization. So that's number one. So there are 3 basic thoughts I'm going to share with you. This is the first thought, that people are at the center of value. Number 2 is if you look at HR, HR is the strategic resource driving department or function in an organization, which ideally is supposed to create value or help the CEO fulfill his strategy to create value by virtue of managing the 5 generations of people who are collectively working together in the organization, along with the 6th, and that is the technology of the organization, the new kinds of machines, the plants, the machinery, and the new technology which goes in there. And the 7th is the future intelligent digital systems which are now coming into existence. So HR is supposed to create an enabling environment where these 5 generations of people working together along with the technology of the organization and with the future intelligence digital systems create a sammanvay to maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization's value creation. That's the second thought. So you require people in an organization, HR department as a function. And the third is that the board of an organization is at the center of the governance of the enterprise. So the entire governance of the enterprise, because it is no good for the CEO and his team of executives to be only creating the business plans and the short-term views and things like that. The larger corporate needs to be managed by a board which is at the center of the governance of the enterprise. And what is it expected to do? It is expected to do different things than what the CEO and his team are supposed to do at the second stage. So boards are supposed to be the protector of the shareholder interests. They are supposed to be the custodians of the stakeholder value creation. They are supposed to be the owner of the reputation and the brand of the organization. And they are the governors of the values of the organization. All right. So they have a totally different role, but that role is very, very critical to be able to effectively create value. Okay. So unless and until the governance of the organization is right and the shareholders who have invested in the company are protected, and unless and until the norms and reputation of the company and its relationship with the rest of the universe is right, this is not going to happen. So there are three things. People are at the center of value creation processes. HR is a very, very strategic function. So most of the HR managers that you were talking about effectively do that job. And I hope they do it, because some don't even do that. But the third is that the board is at the center of the governance, and it also requires to have a very, very strong overview of people who are the prime creators of value. So board has a different role to play for the purposes of managing the people. So these are the three things which are totally linked and different. And this is the normal HR people, as we have come across, find it very difficult to jump over from the second stage, that is where they are strategic resource drivers for the CEO and maybe effective, but they are not able to make the differentiated move onto the board and fulfill the HR role that the board is supposed to fulfill. So there is a different HR role on the board, and they are not able to meet that requirement, which is why they end up failing. Does it give you the first
Okay.
set of long-winded answer to your very nice small question?
I think it gives us a very comprehensive picture of what is expected from HR, and so where they get stuck and what they need to be doing further. So the main thing that seems to be coming up right now is at the board. So they get stuck at the strategic level, and they really now need to understand the function of the board and then how they can contribute to that function. Tell us a bit more there.
So let me first tell you that we keep talking about HR wanting a seat on the board. Now, HR wanting a seat on the board has, in my mind, raises three questions. Is it the need of the organization to create potential contributions that the board will benefit from? Is that the reason why there should be a seat for HR on the board? Or there is a power and greed for self-glorification in the mind of the HR guy who's stuck at the strategic level and therefore wants to move into a board level because he sees his elation and glorification by coming onto the board? Or third is that it is a relative power politics of the organization, where if the finance guy and the marketing guy are sitting on the board and the HR guy is not sitting on the board, and therefore he feels that there is a relative power politics that is being played out, and therefore he's seeking a seat on the board. So just saying seat on the board has many, many drivers of why and what is the reason why the organization needs to have the HR guy sitting on the board. So ideally, if the organization feels the need and the potential ability to create value from people for the contributions that the organization at the board level requires of the HR guy, that's the best reason when the HR guy needs to find a seat on the table. So he needs to give that element of awareness and confidence to the board that his presence on the board will create a differentiated value which the others may not be able to do. And that's the time he comes on to the seat on the board. The
All
problem
right.
that
To be
comes
able
in,
to, yeah.
and the problem comes in that there are a few different things which are required from HR at the board level, and we will talk about it if you have a question to that.
I love the statement that you made, that the person must be able to create a differentiated value so that he does get invited, and therefore he's able to address the need of the organization. And so tell us a little bit more about that.
So let me tell you that whilst the Companies Act Section 13 and all the new sections which have come in are making it quite mandatory for boards to have people's committee and all of those, and the whole idea is that the board now, at least at the theoretical level, is able to appreciate the requirement of a board overview on the organization's most critical resource, which is people. ultimately we find that whilst this is very, very good in theory and law, when you go and see the minutes of what kind of issues they discuss and what kind of things they handle, you will realize that actually it is nothing but duplicating and overviewing what the strategic HR guy is doing at the board level. And that is not the purpose. The board at the board level, what it is supposed to do about HR is far more different than what the strategic HR with the CEO is supposed to drive. And there is no reason why two institutions of an organization, the strategic organization and the board organization, need to be looking at the same things in HR, right? So therefore, it is very important that HR is able to create strategically differentiated value when it sits on the board than what it performs on a day-to-day basis when it is reporting to the CEO in its role.
Okay. So, what does this differentiated value look like?
So let me explain to you, but first let me tell you what is expected of the HR guy when he sits on the board level. Of course, a chunk of
Excellent.
it you will see a certain element of duplicacy also. So duplicacy meaning this is not so exclusive because finally you are dealing with people, whether you're dealing at board level or you're dealing at a strategic level. But let me tell you specifically what is required at the board level HR and what HR expectations from a board should be like. So, number one is the person who's sitting with the responsibility for HR, because ideally speaking, a board should have all the capabilities built inside, which they believe would be the challenges which the organizations will in the future be facing. So, if they believe that the organization will be facing people challenges, of course, you require a very, very strong person on the board with an HR background to be also able to understand what the challenges are and overview the strategic action that the company is taking on those areas. So, number one is deep knowledge of human psychology and ability to channelize human contributions to the business strategy of the enterprise, not just a champion of HR processes, SOPs, and procedures. Generally, over a period of time, if you are a reasonably good HR manager, you join them as general manager, you become an assistant vice president, you become a vice president. If you're good with your CEO, you get promoted as vice president or president at the strategic level. That's good enough. But we find that generally what happens is that the strategic knowledge of the human psychology and ability to channelize human contributions to the business strategy of the enterprise, which has to create value, that linkage is missing in a big way. So most of these guys get stuck up because they are master champions of HR processes. You talk about career management process, you talk about performance management process, all of that, fantastic. But that is where their knowledge ends. They are not able to make the leap forward and link up that knowledge to the sheer knowledge of how to link it to the strategy of the business to create value. That inability halts them from moving into the boardroom. The second, they have to create an enabling environment of all of these. Because now today the shareholders have created and elected a board to ensure that what the CEO and his executive team have promised to be delivering in the short term and long term, is the organization moving in the right direction? Is it sufficiently resourced? Is it having the right kind of people who have the ability to manage the 5 generations of the people, the technology that is prevailing to create value in the organization, in the value chain, and the new directions that the digital intelligence of the organization will be introducing to create efficiency and effectiveness? Is it sufficiently provided? Is that risk covered? Because the board has to ensure that if there's any risk coming to the business plans given, that risk is sufficiently covered by the strategic team. Now, this is where the HR guy sitting on the board is supposed to ensure that the people and talent risk, which is one of the largest risks of an organization. Imagine a high-powered CEO today meets with a cardiac arrest and can meet in a stressful environment that we live in, meets with a cardiac arrest, and the organization has no strategic succession planning for that position. And for 8 months they search and they don't find who is going to overlook the business risks that may come, by consequences of which the shareholders may lose their value purely because the strategic HR did not do its job well. So was the board driving it and ensuring and auditing that that kind of a job was fulfilled well? So that's the kind of overview that it needs to have. Then is
Mhm.
the HR department or the strategic HR department under the CEO, does it have impactful HR programs and policies? Sometimes what happens is that most strategic HR departments under the CEO do the best practices which they believe is generating uh, engagement, generating a high morale, etc., etc. Do it for all the right purposes. But what happens is that the missing piece is, what is the link of these programs and policies onto the P&L of the organization, and what are the contributions they make to the line items of the balance sheet? That is the missing point. Therefore, in the overview, whenever the board meets 4 times officially and 400 times unofficially if they have to, the reason is that they need to ensure that what the strategic HR department is doing in terms of spending the critical and valuable resources of the organization, money, programs, motivation, etc., etc., is contributing to the P&L effectively and is driving capability building, which contributes to the balance sheet of the organization enhancing. Now, that is possible only if the HR guy understands finance, understands P&L, understands balance sheet, understands cash flow. My experience is that most of the HR guys have a very superficial understanding of finance. They maybe go through a 7-day program called Finance for Non-Finance and they believe they understand finance. But deep rooted, as you scratch the surface, you will realize that the veneer comes off and their ability to really understand numbers, particularly the P&L numbers that they are contributing to or leading to a big buildup of P&L account, is missing. In fact, if you look at most of the organizations, their compensation programs have been designed in such a way that the long-term implication of cost on the P&L account and the hidden costs are not even, they are not even aware of that. So therefore, the differentiator as to why some people from a strategic point of view cannot graduate to the board level is because their understanding of finance is superficial. My basic prescription for anyone who's aspiring to go on to the board level from the HR function is, you are a champion of HR processes and programs. So this is not about giving you a Paramvir Chakra to say you should now sit on the board. This is about a different set of roles that you're supposed to perform, in which number one is your knowledge of finance is going to be critical, because the matrimony between your knowledge of HR and your knowledge of finance will help the organization create value. The next is deep understanding of technology and the value chain. You see, the organizations find that HR policies made are so cookie cutter that for tinker, tailor, soldier, sailor, whichever departments they are working in, generally the policies and the SOPs are very, very similar. Now, the situation is that the technology that the people drive in the plants and the challenges that the salespeople and the marketing people face in the field are far more different. So, do they have the ability to ensure that the differentiated policies which will help the people at different points of time in the different functions they perform, that overview the board will have to ensure that everyone in the organization is covered up and that the organization has the right culture. Whilst, of course, at the strategic level, the behaviors of the CEO and the executive team is to ensure that the right culture is built, but the board has to overview that the same culture is not only being pronounced, but the same culture is actually at the grassroots level of the enterprise being followed. Walking the talk is the organizational leadership following the cultural norms and values that it nurtures, or is it just verbalizing this at various forums and putting it as the vision statement and values of the organization on slide number 1 of every presentation they make to the board? So if that custodianship of the culture of the organization is the responsibility of the board. The next is, Does the organization have a talent surplus and leadership succession? It is very important that the board has to periodically, at least twice in a year, take a very, very serious view of the succession planning process of the organization. Every organization, because the risk that the shareholders will face when critical resources like people, talent, and leadership of the organization, which is the prime creator of value, if they do not have a talent surplus or if they do not have the right capabilities for future. Today, for example, in this post-COVID situation, you're going to find that most organizations who were on March 18 suitably manpowered for the business value chain that they were driving suddenly may find that in the new universe, and the new universe, whenever the work is going to begin, is not going to be 19th March. And much as they would try to recreate and believe that the hiatus of 2-3 months is covered up and whatever the day they start will again become like 19th March and they go back to it, the reality is that it is a paradigm shift and the Kumbh Karan has woken up. So there is no way that you are going to continue doing the same thing. Even if you desire to do that, you will have to learn to do the new things required in the new paradigm. Therefore, do the people have those kinds of capabilities to scale up to do those things? Is the leadership ready? Because most leadership in legacy organizations are old fifth generation people who predominantly do not even understand at times how to make emails. They make manual emails through their secretaries. Secretaries type them on the computer, give it to them. They check it, make corrections. Secretary again changes. There are 2-3 rounds of such approvals, and then the mail is sent. Now, can you imagine? My challenge with most of my clients is that people, the very, very senior people in organizations who have the power to decide the digital future forays of the organization are themselves having the power to decide, but are themselves digitally challenged.
Yes, so true, so true.
So now, how are they going to decide the digital future of the enterprise? The new technologies. So they have not upgraded themselves. So the board has to ensure that this situation, this peculiar situation should not prevail. You will see a few legacy companies in the next few months facing these kinds of challenges that we are talking about. Okay. Are the people sufficiently engaged and connected to the strategy? It has to conduct some random surveys and find out whether that is happening or not. Now, the most important responsibility of a board at any point of time is brand management and reputation of the organization. Now, reputation of the organization can go crazy. You can imagine that if the CEO is caught in a trap of, say, something like sexual harassment, or one of those companies in the technology team where the CEO was having an affair with a secretary or something, I forget the name of the company, which was a reality and proven for which he had to go. Those kinds of situations, though they are individual behavioral situations at the senior levels, have a major impact on the brand reputation of the organization. So the brand is understood from a marketing perspective, maybe the responsibility at the strategic management level, but brand as a management and a corporate image, as a reputation in the hearts and minds of the stakeholders, is the responsibility of the brand. So how does the organization and the HR director of the company at the board level ensure that everyone understands these expectations of the reputation and the corporate brand management is ensured, and the organization has the correct enterprise culture and governance processes, including policies for whistleblowers? Generally, most companies try to whitewash the whistleblower policies because they certainly want at the strategic level to cover up someone who is part of the strategic leadership team in case he has indulged in certain behaviors which are non-acceptable behaviors. Now, if the HR guy was not at the board level and reporting into a CEO, and he is going to ensure that his performance management and his performance review for the year is protected, and therefore he tends to protect his peers who may be senior guys having indulged in such kind of behaviors, will actually create a brand and a reputation loss, because that's not the culture the enterprise wants to nurture. So, rightly so, at that point of time, the board is responsible to ensure that the correct governance procedures and processes are followed, and also that the whistleblower policies of the organization are, in a way, intact and in place. And the last challenge that the board has is risk assessment. Most organizations at the strategic level, and I keep differentiating between the strategic level and the board level as two differentiated levels. At the strategic levels, of course, they are ensuring that they are more bothered at any point of time because their performance is reviewed in a much shorter way by the board. So their views are always 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years at max, versus the board as a value creation overview. So it tends to look in a much bigger way. Therefore, the preoccupation of the strategic management with what we call the Pareto monster is much more. Now, Pareto monster means the problem which represents 80% of the problem directed towards his performance assessment. So, therefore, what he perceives as an 80% big monster sitting on his performance review, he tries to put disproportionate energy, disproportionate resources to manage that so that he looks like a shining star when he goes for his performance review with the board. But this has a limitation. His inability to assess the small problems which have huge potentials to become someday in the future the black swan events. And that is exactly why the board is supposed to also do its own risk assessment to the corporate, to the organization, see if adversity is arising like the adversity we are facing right of now. How are these adversity? Does the organization leadership have the change transformation capability? Do the leadership people in the strategic organization have the championship of knowledge, practices, and processes of leading the organization stage by stage from the dark ages to the future growth stage in a new paradigm is also the responsibility of the board. And therefore, because it is a leadership and a people related thing, it is the responsibility of the HR guy on the board. So these are the differentiated things. So if the strategic guy does not have it in him to understand, or he believes that doing the same strategic job only for purposes of power or only for purposes of relativity of his positioning with the other functional heads, he wants a seat on the table. Well, we are doing an injustice then to the organization.
Well, I have now a clear understanding of what is required at a board level, which is very different from what I would be doing
At
at
a
a
strategic
strategic
level.
level as an HR leader. So I have really understood this, and so now I want to start moving towards doing more of this. And one clear competency that has come across is the ability to understand PNL and finance and the link to the
Technology.
business performance. Yes. So how do I now start developing these competencies? How do I start putting this into action? Because you've given me the big picture and now I want to do it.
Okay, so if I were to give a kind of a session to to people who are at that level and who we believe should someday in the future want to aspire to get into board HR roles, what are some of the things that they need to have? So number one is, of course, you require to be a strategically successful guy. Unless you have been strategically successful, you cannot graduate to a board role. If you don't even know what is strategic HR, forget about you graduating. If you can't pass your graduation, you cannot go for an MBA, right? That kind of situation. Number one is requirement of knowledge, which is intelligence and intellect. There is a difference between intelligence and intellect. Intellect is the sum total body of knowledge and information required for you to succeed in a given job. If you as an HR person don't understand human resources management, then naturally you don't have the information or the knowledge required to be able to successfully do a job. But over and above that, at this level, you require strategic intelligence. Now, intelligence is your ability to find out what is happening in the environment, what are the challenges that different companies are facing, what are the likely challenges that are bound to come in an adverse situation if it was to come, and does the organization know what are the HR knowledges and systems required to be able to do. So intelligence is one thing, far more different than intellect. Intellect and information is one. Intelligence is about knowing what is happening as outside and being on top of that information. That is why you have, as you know, the Central Bureau of Intelligence, which does spying around to see what is happening. Versus there is Correct. Intelligence. So intelligence is different. People don't understand the difference between intellect and intelligence. You require both.
Okay.
So both is supposed to have that. So number one
All
is
right.
that you need to be on top of your knowledge and your intelligence by virtue of your relationships in the environment have to be at a top class level. All right. So if you want to be on the board, your knowledge should be at the top edge, and including your intellectual and your intelligence relationships outside should be of a high order. Exposure and rotation, therefore knowledge is important. Be a student all your life. I promise you, even today after 4 decades of being in HR, I get up at 4 in the morning and I read seriously for 2 hours. If I don't read now, as a system, I become very incompetent for the day. So reading and keeping yourself abreast, very important. Number two is, I can only tell you that exposure and rotation are very, very, very important. And I can tell you my own examples, and I'm not that I am some kind of an icon, so I would believe that is the best way. But I can tell you that if I have succeeded in whatever reasonable ways, it has been due to the exposure I picked up and the rotational assignments I picked up, which is very, very important. Most people, when I interview people for the board or for the strategic levels in certain companies, particularly when clients now request me to look at their guys, I find that their exposure, even in the HR function, is limited to one or two or three functions. They do not really have hands-on experience of managing everything. Most of the people would not have handled industrial relations. Most of the people would not have handled compensation designs, etc., etc. They would most have done a wing-to-wing business HR role. Someone may have done a little bit of here and there of talent acquisition role. Someone may have done some performance management role, or someone may have done some training work or something of this kind. But the entire exposure to the full range of job as they develop into a future leader, their exposure even in the HR function is suspect. All right. So number one, I would say is ideally you should try and collect all that exposure that is required for you. The third is you need to have cross-functional rotational experience. So the next most important thing is cross-functional assignment. And I will tell you a story. At one point of time in my career, very consciously, I took a role away and I stepped back one level to move from HR into marketing. And I became the marketing guy for the Middle East for Marks and Spencer's at
Mm-hmm.
Alphabets. Now, when I moved from HR to marketing, I went and for a few months I did my HR role, my marketing role. I found that none of the HR things were connecting with the marketing strategies that I was developing. So I went to the HR guy who succeeded me and I said, "What are you doing? None of your strategies are working, and I'm not able to do my marketing job if you continue with the same kind of stupid strategies." So he looked at my face very surprisingly and said, "But why are you telling me? These are your policies. You did it when you were in HR. I have not changed any of that. So what are you talking about?" So when you start doing another functional role, you realize that, oh my God, it's just not even connecting with what the other guys are doing. No doubt you are the dog who's being beaten up by everybody because you think that you are doing a great job, but it's not even connecting with the basic requirements of the other guys. And unless and until you do your appreciation of the other functions, their delivery, your number orientation, your balance sheet orientation, your market orientation, your insights, your ability to segment your talent or your segment the market, none of this you can understand. You will be like a small Medak or a frog in the well thinking you know everything, possibly at a theoretical level, but at the practical level, you will not know. And therefore, number one is please get maximum exposure in your own function. And wherever possible, please, 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 if you want to ready yourself for a board role, you need to take job rotational assignment for sure. Cross-functional assignment. And if that your organization does not provide you, at least insist on sitting on cross-functional project teams, which have those project special teams where people from different functions are brought together to be able to do that. At least that will give you exposure. If that is also not an opportunity, use your relationship for your own development. Don't hand over the remote control of your development to your organization. Take charge of that remote control. Go to different functions. Ask people, make friends with them. Ask them that what is it that they do. Ask them about the nuances of their job and learn for yourself, much better than growing up and saying, I don't have that exposure, but I can point the finger to who is responsible, and that's the company for not giving me that exposure. Very, very poor strategy. Take charge of your career, take charge of your development, and don't hand over the remote control of your capability building and development into the hands of someone else. Self-development, reading, as I said, very important. Go through MDPs. Most HR guys, after a certain point of time, always believe they know everything, and all the MDPs are for all the other guys. All right, and they are the ones who are coordinating programs, but they themselves don't want to undergo. Bad luck to you. One day you're going to sit and repent for that call that you have taken. I would believe take sabbatical leave. And I will tell you that I have taken sabbatical leave in my career to do my MBA from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and that made a difference. I was a qualified lawyer. I joined the legal department. At that point of time, I continued there. I desired, after a deep insight, that I wanted to do HR. I had a fantastic job going on, but I took a 2-year sabbatical, went to Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and took a formal degree and knowledge and education in that space which I wanted to grow into. So do not shy away from taking periodic sabbaticals in your career. Very, very important. Mid-career, I would still say that even if you are a successful general manager or someone, please ask your company to sponsor you to maybe one of those classical 2-month, 3-month management development programs at Wharton School or Harvard or IIMs or wherever you can, because it will give you a totally different thing. But don't please go and ask for this purely because you want to build up your CV. If you want to build up your capability, go and ask for it. But if you think that you're going to make your CV look very shining, you want to add a diamond pendant to your chain of experiences by going and doing a 3-month Wharton program or something, please don't do that. You're wasting the organization's time, and it will also not deliver any value, and you have to do hard work at the colleges. Don't understand that it's some free time that you're getting. Okay?
Picnic.
Build a network of relationships. That is very important. All right. Get the knowledge of the impactful best practices in the industry. Develop empathy. Develop empathy, authentic empathy, not verbal empathy. Everyone can do verbal smarts on empathy. When there is a problem, everyone is verbally very smart about how empathetic they are and how they want to be seen as them. Develop authentic empathy for people. Have emotional intelligence. And most important, and the last one is, let your value systems and your spirituality quotient be intact. Most brilliant guys, I promise you, if your value systems are not in place, if you're cutting your corners, if you are trying to do things which are unethical, I promise you, God save you. God save you.
I think you have covered. It is absolutely a fantastically comprehensive list. I've made a note of all your points, and I encourage our listeners to go back and make a. But this is one of the best action plans that one can ever get to move up in one's career. And actually, it's not just for HR. I would say this is for anybody who aspires to a board level position coming from any stream. So, Adil, we are
Thank
coming
you.
close to the end of our time, and each of these things would have been so much exciting to dive deep into. But now, as an HR person, I've understood this is what I need to do. Some thoughts on where do I start making, where do I start?
Start right now. Start right now. Pick out the right books. Start reading. Most HR people, and why HR people? You're right. Actually, this is true for most of the professionals. They buy books for self-development, and the only thing that happens is self-development.
Shelf development and not self development. I like that.
And what happens is that they have fanciful books, all looking very smart and intelligent. Fantastic effect is one was to take pictures of the kind of books they have and then scratch the surface and you realize that it is not there. Another problem and I'm facing, and sorry, it's a very digital problem that I'm facing. The entire desire to, I see on WhatsApp these kind of funny messages. Can you send me your attendance policy? So some 100 people crowdsource it and give the attendance policy. Now, if you over a period of time as you are growing in your career, do not even have the ability to structurally apply your mind and start writing a policy, but find a shortcut to only do crowdsourcing of policies and then try to assimilate it by removing the name of the companies and trying to mishmash 5 clauses from this policy, 2 clauses from another policy, 3 clauses from, how are we going to develop the body of knowledge for future? Someone somewhere in the past developed all of these, and therefore we are where we are today. So the desire to crowdsource, and crowdsourcing is a very, very important way in which information can be accumulated. But do not then do only a cut and paste job. Use that maybe knowledge of best practices, but apply your mind to what your organizational requirement is and design it. Maybe take some ideas, and no harm in taking ideas. That is very, very important. So that's a second line that you should do. Start genuinely assessing yourself. Whenever you are doing your self narrative, when you talk to yourself, when you do your own conversations, when you're talking to yourself, do a meaningful assessment of yourself. That time you're not sitting with your boss, therefore you're not trying to impress upon him how great you are and why you should be given a better increment. That review is a totally different review. Do your self review, do your self assessment. Try and find out what is it that I'm supposed to have versus what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. Do a very authentic exercise and develop a structured plan. The third most important thing is, you are earning your money and you want to earn more money for your future. Make some part of your money earned as an investment in your own development. Don't keep waiting for organizations to sponsor you to programs. Keep some part of the earnings you are making as investment in your career ahead so that you can earn more money. Investments are supposed to do that. So why do you make investment only into bank accounts and bank deposits and company shares? Also invest in your career. Because once you develop those skill sets, your ability to attractively position yourself for those higher growing jobs will be so much out there that you will actually gain a return X times more than what your monetary money in a bank account could have grown. So therefore, do that. Invest in your career, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of money investment, so that you can focus on going to the right universities and doing sabbatical programs which your organization doesn't offer you. And most important is, whenever job rotational opportunities come up, please do not look upon that only from a power point of view. Even if it means if you're getting a fantastic exposure in marketing department, and if you desire to take marketing exposure, don't say that I am general manager HR, so I need to be promoted only as vice president marketing, then I will take a cross-functional role. No, 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 no. It is for your own development, right? It is investment in your career. Even if it means going one level lower into a marketing function and growing therein, I would suggest you do that, because that is a structured investment. If you say, no, make me a vice president marketing and I will go, no way, because the marketing department is going to ask the question, why the hell should we work under such a vice president who doesn't know anything on marketing at all? So there are a few basics. Do your serious self-talking. Seriously focused on what you really want to do for your and meaningfully do for your career, and make a plan. I'm sure that if you're really having the potential to grow, then you'll be able to make that plan for yourself with this kind of a framework and a mindset.
So we have starting points. So Adil, as we bring our conversation to a close, I did mention that
Don't
you are
bring it to a
now.
close. There is one point I certainly want to mention before I end.
Absolutely, go ahead.
After all of this, and this is kind of overarching, two important things. Number one is, understand that happiness is the purpose of living. And first, most important, it is very important to be a good human being. If you are a good human being, you will end up becoming a good father, you'll end up becoming a good son, you'll end up becoming a good brother, you'll even end up becoming a good lover, a good husband, a good whatever you do, and therefore a good professional in an organization. But very, very important for success is need to be a good human being. Begin from there.
I think you've just then come to the ultimate root of all our conversation by being a good human being and using that as a starting point. I will put up the link of your website also in the podcast description, but And if you would like, please feel free to connect with Adil directly, and he will then take it forward. So, Adil, thank you so much for being with us and for just sharing all your wisdom and insights on our show today.
Thank you so much, and I hope it helps your audience.
Thank you. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening. Please connect with us on coachtoolbox@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and review this channel. Details of our ICF approved coach training programs and our services as executive coaches and coaching supervisors are on www.globalcoachtrust.org. See you in our next session.